Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. Welcome to the first day of teaser season for the upcoming patch 0.2.0. 0.2.0 is going to be the biggest patch since Path of Exile 2 came out. The exact contents of it, we don't know yet. It's quite plausible that it includes new classes, but we also don't know that for sure. And additionally, it's likely going to include some sort of expansion of Endgame, but what exactly that is, we don't know yet. The other thing that we do know, however, is that Grinding Gear Games use what's often called a league system. Now, if you're a Path of Exile 1 player, you probably know all of this already, but there's a number of people that only follow PoE 2 stuff on this channel, so I want to quickly go through what to expect with a new league. Leagues are basically an opt-in reset to the game, so you'll have the ability to jump into a new, fresh start for Path of Exile 2. What this means is that no one is going to have Astromentus already, no one's going to have 16 mirrors and 7,000 Divine Orbs sitting in their stash. Instead, it's going to be a fresh start. Some people will quickly get back to that point, but they're going to be starting from nothing the same as you. You don't have to jump into the new league if you're not interested in it, but it's generally the case that the vast majority of the Path of Exile 1 player base do jump into the new league. If you prefer not to though, you can stay in standard, your old characters will remain playable there. It is important to note though, that game balance changes might result in them being slightly less powerful than you remember. There'll be a whole bunch of balance changes taking place with 0.2.0 as well, and this is probably going to be the largest balance pass that Path of Exile 2 ever sees. On top of that, there will be some form of new content added, some of which might be exclusive to the new league for a short period of time, after which it's likely to get rolled into the core game in some form. A lot of those details though, they'll be clarified as this teaser season progresses. The key things: big balance pass, new content, and an opt-in fresh economy where you'll be able to make a new character alongside other people who are also making new characters. So that's the information that Path of Exile 1 players already knew, but that might be new to some of you. Today, I want to go through the things that are new to everyone, starting with one thing Grinding Gear Games put out today that's not really newsworthy. I'll put a link to this down in the description below though, because it's kind of cool. They released a whole bunch of concept art for Path of Exile 2 monsters, 6 different artworks, including this glorious looking crested behemoth, all the way through to Doriani's Triumph, the second phase of the Act 3 boss. So that's something cool, but you came here for the real news that's going to change the game, and we're going to start with the first of 5 support gems. That's right, they revealed 5 support gems today, and it is implied strongly from the wording that they used that this is less than half of them. Now, Deranged Support is the first of these. This is an intelligence aligned gem, and it's one that empowers a build that doesn't really have that much support yet. This is for chaos damage over time spells, but specifically for chaos damage over time spellcasters that are very, very heavily intelligence based. It's worth noting, I say chaos here, other non-ailment damage over time can benefit from this as well. However, this is not going to work on Ignite, Poison or Bleed because of this non-ailment line that's here. Now this supports skills which you use yourself that can deal damage. Supported skills gain an energy shield cost equal to your total intelligence. This can be quite painful, especially when you look at just how high intelligence can scale in the game. On top of that, they also deal more non-ailment damage over time based off your intelligence. So if you have 1,200 intelligence, then this is going to mean that the supported skills deal 96% more non-ailment damage over time, but they cost a massive 1,200 energy shield to cast. And this is a cost you can't circumvent by being out of energy shield either. So this is a very real cost, and this is something that empowers a build that doesn't really have all that many tools yet. Now I mentioned that intelligence scores can go very high. If we have a look at the characters that are using Astromentus over in the current league, and I'll put a link up at the end of this video to a video that I did on this website, poe2.ninja, but what you will see is that there are currently 49 characters in Standard League that have 1,200 or more intelligence on their character. So it is definitely possible to get these sorts of numbers. I can have a look at the exact way they're set up if you're keen to see exactly how they do this. And in fact, I'm only considering characters that are wearing Astromentus here. There might be a very small number that don't use Astromentus that also manage to hit this 1,200 intelligence threshold. Next, we have Volcanic Eruption. This is a new support gem that is very much fire themed, and it's a payoff for inflicting Ignite on enemies. But it's a fairly complicated one. It can only support a strike skill. So this supports melee strike skills that you use yourself. Supported skills trigger Volcanic Eruption on hit against ignited enemies. Unfortunately, we are missing information we need to fully assess this. We are missing information on exactly what these Volcanic Eruptions do. We can see what they look like. There's a video that Grinding Gear Games put up, basically where you strike the enemy, If it's not already ignited, it does nothing, but if it was already on fire, then it causes 3 fireballs to fly up in the air and drop down close by, very much resembling the Path of Exile 1 skill Molten Strike. However, we don't know how much damage they do. That is something that you would need to be able to click on this Volcanic Eruption tab in order to see, and unfortunately, you can't click on a button like that inside video footage, so we're not able to see that information. Be curious to see what the numbers are and whether this ends up being a mainstay or whether it ends up being something that's almost never used. I think it'll be one or the other. I don't think there's much space in between. Next we have Embitter. Embitter is an interesting gem. This is something that transforms one of your skills to deal purely cold damage, or at least very close to purely cold damage. I feel like possibly the best way to explain this is to consider the unique staff, the Burden of Shadows. This is the rare item that drops from the Ritual Boss. It's not something people generally want though, and it has the text, skills gain 1% of damage as chaos damage per 3 life cost, amongst other things. So if you cast a spell that costs 270 life, then it's going to gain 90% of the damage added as additional chaos damage. Now, if you've linked to Embitter support, that 90% increased chaos damage is going to become 90% increased cold damage instead. This is going to be one of those things that is very, very heavily limited by your ability to only use it on one skill. That restriction is going to be very severe on this gem, and it's going to be something that will cause some interesting decisions, although I think in many cases the decision players will make is simply not to use this at all. But there will be cases where you'll use this, especially in conjunction with a skill you only bother casting when an enemy is already frozen, and if you can stack a number of the conditional things that add additional damage to frozen enemies, then that might be something that's worth your while considering there. Concoct is next, and this one's a doozy. This one has an enormous cost. There's another couple of support gems in Path of Exile too. Hourglass comes to mind, that cause a gem to be something that you can no longer spam. Concoct is one of these, and actually Concoct looks like it will stack very, very well with Hourglass support. Hourglass supports any damaging skill you use yourself, causes it to deal significantly more damage but to gain a 10-second cooldown, and it can't support things that already have a cooldown. Well, what Concoct does, it doesn't interact with cooldowns in any way, but it does provide a very real cost to using the skill that it's supporting. Support skills that you use yourself that damage enemies with hits. Supported skills consume a percentage of your maximum life last charges, and this percentage is large, so using this is a big commitment, inflicting more powerful bleeding based upon the number of life blast charges that are consumed. Supported skills consume 1/5 of your maximum life blast charges on use. Ouch. However, the reward for this, supported skills have 2% more magnitude of bleeding they inflict per life blast charge consumed. So this is going to be a huge boost to the amount of damage that you do. If you've got a life blast that has 100 charges on it, then this is going to be a 40% more multiplier to the magnitude of bleeding, but it's going to come at a very real cost because that's 2 less uses of your life blast potentially. So very high cost, but a significant payoff on this gem. I think most people will elect not to use it, but it is there as an interesting option that people can play around with. Only use this if you're pretty sure that you can kill something in one hit though, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're suddenly really low on life blast charges because you use Concoct here. Commiserate is next, and this one's really interesting. This one's a Dexterity aligned support gem, and it's something that basically feeds off your ailments. Support skills which you use yourself that can cause damaging hits. Supported skills inflict more powerful ailments if you are afflicted with those ailments at the time of use, while also removing from you any ailment that they inflict. So, let's consider what this means for purposes of Ignite, but it is the same for other ailments as well. If you're suffering from an Ignite and you use a skill that is linked to Commiserate, and if that skill succeeds in inflicting an Ignite on an enemy, then not only is that Ignite going to be turbocharged by 30%, but the Ignite is also going to be cleansed from you. I think the best use case for this is probably actually going to be as an ailment cleanse. You might use some sort of skill that you don't really care about that much in normal play and use it linked to Commiserate. You just want to find a way that this skill can inflict all of these different ailments at once, or at least as many of them as possible. And then if you do start to suffer from a particular ailment, then you pop off this skill and hopefully it cleanses it from you. But I do think this is one of those interesting support gems. That's a support use for it, where you're using it to support your character, but there will be ways to reliably self-apply ailments too, and when they exist, you'll be able to share the joy of being on fire with other enemies through the use of Commiserate support. So if you can find a way to ignite yourself reliably, and also to survive that ignite while it's on you. So that's the 5 new support gems, but there were also 2 new unique items that were teased. These were teased last Friday. I didn't think they were significant enough to do their own video, but let's go through them now, starting out with the Hammer of Faith. Now, this giant maul does mediocre damage. It's a two-handed mace that deals 400 DPS, give or take a little bit, and that's not a very large amount. It's not derisory, it will increase a bit with quality, but still you can get 1,000 on a rare that's good but that is nowhere near merit tier, and you can get 800 relatively cheaply on a rare item. So this is a long way behind. And that's something that's a long-term problem in Path of Exile 1 as well. A lot of two-handed weapons, they just don't have the DPS to be popular. However, there's some interesting other stats on this one. Firstly, 10% to all elemental resistances. You got to get this somewhere. 50% increased mana regeneration rate. This is a useful stat even for melee builds in Path of Exile 2. Mana is something that is a lot tighter than it is in Path of Exile 1 on attack builds. Then we have the Defining mod. You gain a random shrine buff every 10 seconds. Now, shrines are different in Path of Exile 2 to Path of Exile 1, but there's quite a few good ones there, and so this will result in you gaining a bunch of extra damage at various times, but there's also a couple of shrines that are sometimes detrimental to you, and that's going to be something that'll be frustrating to deal with. Ultimately, I'm very much not sold on this item, but we have saved the best one of the uniques until last, and that is the Bringer of Rain. This was an item that was originally in Path of Exile 1, and that was then poached over to Path of Exile 2, but it needed a complete redesign. It interacts with Path of Exile 1's different socket system, and as a result, it couldn't really be brought over without tremendous changes. The key thing though, this is a helmet that has a text, "You cannot use chest armor." That's been kept from Path of Exile 1. Now, it has a moderate amount of armor and evasion rating on it. Hopefully there'll be some underlying systems changes that makes armor a little bit more appealing to use in Path of Exile 2, because at the moment, this is essentially just a 224 evasion rating helmet when it comes to the defensive mods that are on it. It provides you with some accuracy rating, a small amount of life regen per second, not really small, but only medium, and then it has a text, "You can wield two-handed axes, maces, and swords in one hand." So assuming we don't get into dual wield shenanigans here, what this is allowing you to do is sacrifice your chest slot in order to pick up a shield slot, which is sometimes going to be the right decision, sometimes it's going to be the wrong decision. That's all going to depend upon the itemization that's available for the particular archetype of character you're playing. But it does provide a lot of really interesting options, and for that reason, I think that this might be one of the more sought after items in Path of Exile 2's second season. All that said, I will put a little bit of a warning here before planning on building around the Bringer of Rain. Just work under the assumption it could be quite rare. If it does turn out that it's not rare, then you get a pleasant surprise. But this is the sort of item that's so build defining that it could easily be made as rare as the rarest items in the game, things like Astromentus. In that case, even if the demand's not that high, it's probably not that easy to get. And if the demand is high, well, we saw how expensive Astromentus got in the first season. So that is the end of Teaser Season Day 1 for Path of Exile 2's 0.2.0 release. I really hope Groningen Games come up with a catchier name than that. But until then, I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlobs have interesting results.